Alright guys, in this video we are going to be looking into project schedule management, and one of the first things we're going to have to worry about are constraints. And constraints are things that are going to limit the progress of your project. And another way people commonly think about this is what are the bottlenecks. And specifically we have these things called theories of constraints, which is where we focus on figuring out ways that we can reduce the impact of a particular constraint so that it's not a limiting factor anymore in a project. An example of this is if we were running a farm and someone wanted to start making a lot more tomatoes, and we realized that our faucets didn't have big enough diameter pipes to actually get enough water in for all the tomatoes. That's a perfect example of a bottleneck, and so the theory of constraints is going to show us that we should focus our efforts on increasing the size of these pipes so that it's no longer a constraint to us. And then once we do that, then the next step would be, what's the next thing limiting us? Like, do we have enough fertilizer? Do we have enough sunlight? All those types of things to actually scale up your operation. But in this case, we're focusing on projects. An example of this is seen in the lean manufacturing techniques, and the goal is to reduce overhead. So Toyota is a great example of a company that basically invented lean manufacturing or implemented it very well, because when Toyota was small and they were competing against Ford Motor Company, Toyota had to find ways that they could make cars much more efficiently than Ford did. Ford had the luxury of tons of money, so they could have these huge warehouses full of parts, whereas Toyota didn't have that, so they needed to find ways that they could basically focus on, what are the bottlenecks that they have? Do they necessarily need a huge warehouse? Stuff like that. So theory of constraints is a very important topic in project management. And then we've also got different types of constraints, which we can think of as dependencies. So we've basically got these mandatory dependencies, which are a form of hard logic. And what these are telling us is that activities have to be done in a particular way. What this means is that you have to do A and then B and then C. There's no choice in this process. You have to follow it in that way. You have to brush your teeth and then eat dinner. And then, even if you argue, you're like, but it doesn't make any sense, you still got to do it. So that's a mandatory dependency. A discretionary dependency is a soft logic. So that's basically saying no orders required. You can do whatever activity, you can do these activities, but you can do them in whatever order that you'd like. So you can brush your teeth first and then do the laundry, or you can do the laundry and then brush your teeth. I don't really care. That's the discretionary dependency. We also have external dependencies, and to come up with a story for this one, these are external constraints where if I am a baker and I'm working at a bakery, I can't bake a pie until an external contractor installs an oven. So I'm just going to sit there with my unbaked pie until we've got a oven installed. So that's an external dependency. And then we've also got internal dependencies, and this would be an example where I can't bake a pie until one of my colleagues upstream of me has finished making the dough for me to put it into my pie. So that's an example of a hard logic internal dependency. And we've also got scheduled network diagrams. This is a pretty big topic, and I've got 2 videos dedicated to this, focusing on how do we create these diagrams based on tables that we see of our activities, their durations, as well as their dependencies. And the gist of it and the key things that you get out of creating these diagrams is an ability to see what is your critical path, as well as what is the project duration, and then you can also calculate float. And so in our case, the reason that we even define a critical path in the first place is that these are the particular activities that you cannot afford to be delayed. If they are delayed, they directly affect your project, and we're going to come back to that very soon. And then your project duration is pretty self-explanatory. It's how long your project is going to take to complete. And then float at a high level, which we are going to drill down into, is basically saying, how much delay can there be in a particular activity before it starts to hurt us. And then we've also got these terms called leads and lags. Leads and lags define what what we're doing to the particular start dates of activities. So if we're going to perform a lead, what that means is we're going to be moving the start date of 2 activities closer together. So we're physically bringing them closer together, or in time. And then lags means that we're moving the start date of activities farther apart. We've got different types of float. We've got free float, which is basically how long an activity can be delayed without affecting a downstream activity. And so that's an important term to have memorized for the project management exams. We've also got total float, which is saying how long can an activity be delayed without affecting the entire project. Total float, just to reiterate, of any activity on your critical path is 0. You cannot be late on any of those critical activities. And then we've also got project float, which is how long can a project be delayed without affecting a customer expectation, for instance. And that is, if we knew that it would take us 5 days to do a project and we were given 100 days to turn it in, we've got a ton of project float because I can do this on day 0 or I can do this on day 95, and I'm going to be fine either way. And then finally, we're going to be looking into how to handle resources. And we've got different theories or techniques that are used by managers. Resource leveling is an example of basically a hard cap on your employees. So basically, if the law says that you got to start paying overtime once people put in more than 40 hours in a week, you basically are saying to all of your employees, no one works over 40 hours a week. I'm not authorizing it. You won't be paid for it. So if you've got any additional work that you're not finishing at the end of your 40 hours this week, put it to next week. So it's a very hard and fast rule for no overtime, basically. Then we've got resource smoothing, which is smoother. It's basically saying that we're going to limit your overtime, but if you're working on an activity that is deemed to be critical, like if you're on an activity that's on the critical path, then you can do overtime because we cannot afford to have delays on those particular activities. So it's like you're saying it's okay some of the time when it's important. So that's going to wrap things up for this video. Hope it helps. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you all next time.